Joining me now in New York is Brian Castner, who wrote Amnesty International's report on American airstrikes in Somalia. In Mogadishu is Abdirizak Omar Mohamed, a member of the Somali parliament and a former internal security minister. Gentlemen, good to have you on the Newsmakers. Brian, let me start with you. Are you absolutely convinced that these airstrikes have killed civilians?
We are, especially in these 5 cases. Last week, AFRICOM, U.S. Africa Command, released a statement that they have done in the last 2 years. They've done 110 strikes, killed 800 terrorists, and killed absolutely 0 civilians. And that's just not a number that's credible and makes sense. We know how war works.
Okay,
and
let's
so in
ask,
the 5 cases that we've documented this report.
Yeah, let's ask the parliamentarian, Abdirizak Omar Mohamed. Who's closer to the truth, Amnesty or AFRICOM?
I think Amnesty is close to the truth. In fact, I think the numbers they have presented is very conservative when you look at the number of airstrikes that Americans have undertaken since 2017. So I think it's very clear because we have cases where families of victims are unable to come to the city to report civilian casualties. So I think the number could have been much greater than that.
Right. And Brian, we reached out to AFRICOM. They pointed us to their statement. So they sent us the link to the same statement that they made. And of course, a lot of it is sort of boilerplate stuff. We've seen with Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere, we have precision military equipment, and we take extreme measures to prevent, this and that civilians don't die. But there's something that was fascinating within that statement where they speak about Al-Shabaab, and they say specifically it is in the interest of the terrorist group Al-Shabaab to untruthfully claim civilian casualties. It is also in the interest of Al-Shabaab to coerce community members to make untrue claims. So amid all of that, Brian, they're suggesting that Amnesty is getting played a little bit by Al-Shabaab on the ground, or they're pulling a fast one on you. Address that for me.
Sure. Yes. I mean, Al-Shabaab propaganda is real. People have all sorts of incentives to lie, whether they be political because of Al-Shabaab or financial incentives if they think there's going to be some sort of financial compensation that is coming. I can tell you that we investigated 15 strikes total. And out of those 15, we only published 5 because the other 10 did not rise to our high evidentiary threshold. So while I'm sure AFRICOM is right that those things happen generally, in the 5 cases that we documented with 14 dead and 8 injured, we are sure that we're not being played.
And Abdirizak Omar Mohamed, when, as a Somali parliamentarian and within the Somali government, when the Somali government approaches AFRICOM and has questions about these things, do the Americans listen?
No, actually, because Somalia was designated as an area of active hostility, which means that they don't consult with the government of Somalia when they are doing those airstrikes. But let me get back to the other question that you have asked, Brian. There was a joint operation of Somali National Army and American Special Forces in August 2017, where 10 civilians were killed. And when the families of the victims came to the city, and they said that we will not bury them. And this has been published in Daily Beast in August, I think in November 2017. So when the report was published, AFRICOM has denied killing any civilians in that operation. But the raid is in Berry village, just outside of Afgoye city. When the families came and MPs pressured the government to investigate the case, the government has admitted of killing civilians. They have compensated 10 civilians who were killed in that raid. So AFRICOM is not coming forward to tell the truth. The second question that you have asked me is because of Somalia, since Somalia was designated as an area of active hostility, there's that second layer of scrutiny.
Right.
In the past, there was interstate interstate vetting. There is nothing. They can just call for an airstrike and they will do it. They don't consult with the Somali
this is
government.
fascinating.
They just
Let me just follow up on this with you, Abdirizak, right? Because I might sound very naive when I ask this question, but in February there was news. Well, they came out and they said that they killed 35 Shabab fighters in Hiran as the group was trying to mass their forces, right? So these were precision strikes. So if I understand this fully, you as a Somali parliamentarian would get the news when I get the news that these people have been killed. Is that what happens?
Yeah, that's exactly what happens, because even not only as a Somali parliamentarian, they don't even consult with the executive branch when they are planning to take airstrikes. They don't consult with the Somali president in advance to tell them that they are going to strike in such area. So just like you get it from the news, that's how we get the news when airstrikes happen in Somalia.
So Brian, we have the U.S. saying, well, this is for not only for the good of the Horn of Africa and for, geostrategically for the region. It's good for Somalia if Shabab is being destroyed. But the fact that they're not consulting with any Somali partners on the ground, what does that mean from your perspective?
Well, I should say that AFRICOM says that everything that they do is in support of the Somali government. And so I think that they have told us that they consult, who they consult with, how often they consult. Do they tell everyone beforehand, or do they only tell afterwards? There's just a real lack of transparency in in a lot of AFRICOM's operations. And I would include in that, most important for Amnesty, is who exactly do they classify as al-Shabaab, and who do they classify as an al-Shabaab network or the al-Shabaab affiliate, and whether everyone that they're striking would be considered a combatant under international humanitarian law. That is not clear to us, and that's why we've asked AFRICOM to investigate and others to investigate exactly who, like you say, when they kill 30-something, 20-something, who are all these people?
Yeah, and one of the questions I had for AFRICOM, if we could have gotten one of their spokespersons on the show, was that, okay, those numbers that Brian mentioned earlier on, Abdirizak, the US saying 110 strikes in 2 years, killing more than 800 people. Every single one of them, according to AFRICOM, verifiably Shabab or linked to Shabab, Al-Qaeda, and so on. If that is the case, wouldn't you expect, Abdirizak, it to be more difficult for Shabab to blow things up in Mogadishu in 2019, which is still what they're doing?
Absolutely. If what they are saying is the truth. First of all, I don't believe that there are zero casualty in those drone and airstrikes. But what I think, the Al-Shabaab lives in villages where normal civilians live. So under the policy framework of the active Somalia as an area of active hostility, it means that any enemy combatants, even perceived person, will be attacked regardless of whether that person is Al-Shabaab or not. If what the AFRICOM is saying is the truth and that there was zero civilian casualties, then the attacks, the symmetric attacks that Al-Shabaab is doing in cities like Mogadishu would have substantially declined. But instead, it has increased, actually. The number of civilians, the number has gone up when you compare to the previous years.
Brian, there's a line in the report where they say our assessments are based on post-strike analysis using intelligence methods not available to non-military organizations. Sounds very, I know what you do not know, so don't ask questions. How do you read that as Amnesty?
Well, it is certainly true that AFRICOM knows things don't. It takes us months to figure out exactly what day a strike happened, what the target was, the exact grid location. They know all this stuff before they even start the investigation. This is what's frustrating, is that they start so far ahead of where we would, and yet we're able to find these cases of civilian casualties and they aren't. And I think it's honestly because they do an very initial assessment. They see maybe that the allegation came from an al-Shabaab friendly news site. They dismiss the allegation as not credible, and then they don't speak to anyone. And we conducted over 150 interviews on the ground, some of those on the ground in Mogadishu, some of them remotely. And in every single case, the people we spoke to, eyewitnesses, family members, survivors of the strikes, they told us that they had never spoken to a Somali government official before. They had never spoken to an American government official before. So I think this is a case where, yes, AFRICOM knows some stuff we don't, but I think we know things they don't. And so when you put the two together, that's why we're asking them to use our information and conduct their own investigation.
Very finally, your report's called The Hidden U.S. War in Somalia. Did you call it the hidden U.S. war because nobody's really talking about it?
Well, obviously, people in Somalia are talking about it, and the civilians that are caught in between the airstrikes and al-Shabaab know about it. But as far as in the United States, no, it's very much in the back burner. There's not a lot of transparency from AFRICOM. There hasn't been a lot of news coverage. And so the number of strikes have just gone up and up and up. The number of civilians possibly killed has gone up. And it has not gotten the attention that we think it deserves.
Yeah, and what is fascinating, certainly what is fascinating, just in conclusion, is that even if everything they said was true, it's fascinating how this isn't even in the American public discourse. Even if it was true that 800 terrorists were killed over the past 2 years, with over 100 airstrikes, is not even a footnote in foreign policy right now in those conversations. It's fascinating. Brian, I thank you very much for joining us. And Abdirizak, Omar, Mohamed, the parliamentarian from Somalia as well. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure having you on the Newsmakers.